Amy Chen sat by the big window in her classroom and watched the purple grass move in the wind. The two suns were getting lower in the sky, and soon it would be time to go home. She pressed her small hand against the cool glass and smiled. This was her favorite time of day on New Eden. "Amy, are you listening?" asked Helen Baker from the front of the room. Helen was the best teacher in the whole colony. She had kind eyes and always wore her brown hair in a neat bun. She never got angry when the kids asked too many questions about their new world. "Sorry, Miss Baker," Amy said, turning back to face the class. Her best friend Danny Rodriguez sat next to her and gave her a small smile. Danny had been her friend since they first came to New Eden 3 years ago. They were both 8 years old now and knew every corner of the colony. Helen smiled back at Amy. "I was just telling everyone about the Harvest Festival tomorrow. Your parents have worked very hard to grow food on this planet. The festival is our way of celebrating their success." Amy felt excited. The Harvest Festival was the best day of the year. There would be games and good food and music. All the grown-ups would be happy and relaxed. Maybe she and Danny could sneak away to explore the crystal caves they found last week. Outside the classroom, Jake Morrison walked through the main street of New Eden. Jake was the colony administrator, which meant he was like the mayor of their small town. He was a tall man with gray hair and friendly eyes. Everyone liked Jake because he always listened to their problems and tried to help. Jake stopped to talk to Mrs. Wong, who was hanging clothes outside her house. "The weather looks good for tomorrow," he said, looking up at the clear purple sky. "My tomatoes are perfect this year," Mrs. Wong replied. "The soil here is so rich. Much better than back on Earth." Jake nodded. Earth was far away now. It took 6 months for messages to travel between Earth and New Eden. Most of the colonists tried not to think about home too much. This was their home now. At the edge of the colony, Carl Johnson stood in the security office and checked the daily reports. Carl was the security chief, but there was not much security work to do on New Eden. The biggest problems were usually lost pets or arguments between neighbors. Carl was a big man who used to be a soldier on Earth. He came to New Eden because he wanted a quiet life. He got married to Lisa Parker 2 years ago. Lisa was the chief engineer and the smartest person Carl had ever met. She could fix anything that broke in the colony. "Another quiet day," Carl said to himself as he looked at the reports. No problems anywhere. The defense satellites around the planet showed nothing but empty space. Sometimes Carl wondered if they even needed security on New Eden, but Jake always said it was better to be safe. Lisa Parker was working in the power station when Carl called her on the radio. "How are things looking for tomorrow?" he asked. "Perfect," Lisa said, wiping oil from her hands. "The power grid is running great. The water systems are good. Everything is ready for the festival." Lisa loved her job. She had built most of the important systems in the colony from scratch. When something broke, she was always the one to fix it. Back in the classroom, Amy and Danny listened as Helen talked about the different plants that grew on New Eden. Purple grass was everywhere, but there were also strange blue flowers that glowed at night and tall silver trees that made music when the wind blew through them. "Can we go explore after school?" Danny whispered to Amy. "My mom said I have to help cook for tomorrow," Amy whispered back. "But maybe later." Danny nodded. They had found so many interesting things around the colony. Last month they discovered a stream where the water was bright green but tasted sweet. The week before that they found rocks that were warm to touch even though they were not in the sun. The bell rang and all the children got ready to go home. Amy packed her books in her bag and said goodbye to Helen. Outside, her mother was waiting with the other parents. "How was school today?" asked Amy's mother as they walked home together. "Good," Amy said. "Miss Baker told us about the festival tomorrow. Can Danny come to our house before it starts?" "Of course," her mother said. "His parents are helping with the music, so they will be busy early." That evening, Jake Morrison stood on the balcony of his office and looked out over the colony. 3,000 people lived here now. They had built a good life on this strange world. The houses were simple but comfortable. The farms were growing well. The children were happy and healthy. Jake thought about how different things were from Earth. On Earth, everything was crowded and rushed. Here on New Eden, people had time to talk to each other. Children could play safely outside. Everyone knew their neighbors. The two suns were setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that never existed on Earth. In a few hours, the three moons would rise and fill the night with silver light. Far above the planet, beyond, the atmosphere where no human eyes could see, something else was watching New Eden. Cold reptilian eyes studied the readings on their screens. They saw the small human settlement with its weak defenses and rich farmland. Commander Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire looked at the data his scouts had gathered. Humans were soft creatures, he thought. They cared too much about their young and their comfort. They would be easy to defeat. This colony will make a good example, Vexitar told his officers. When we are finished here, other human settlements will surrender without a fight. The Zephyrian warships moved through space toward New Eden, their weapons ready and their hearts cold. They had no idea that they were about to make the biggest mistake in the history of their empire. On New Eden, Amy Chen fell asleep in her bed, dreaming about the Harvest Festival and all the fun she would have with Danny tomorrow. She did not know that morning would bring terror instead of celebration. Amy woke up early on the morning of the Harvest Festival. She was too excited to sleep anymore. The two suns were just starting to rise, and the purple grass outside her window sparkled with morning dew. Today was going to be the best day ever. She got dressed quickly and ran to the kitchen where her mother was making breakfast. "Can I go get Danny now?" Amy asked, bouncing on her feet. "Let him sleep a little longer," her mother said with a smile. The festival does not start until noon. But Amy could not wait. She ate her breakfast as fast as she could and then sat by the window, watching for Danny to wake up. Other families were already moving around the colony, getting ready for the big day. Jake Morrison was in his office early, checking all the systems one more time. He wanted everything to be perfect for the festival. The weather was beautiful, the food was ready, and everyone was excited. What could go wrong on such a perfect day? At exactly 8 in the morning, everything changed. The sky above New Eden suddenly filled with massive dark shapes. Huge ships appeared out of nowhere, blocking out the morning suns. They were bigger than anything the colonists had ever seen, with strange designs and weapons that hummed with dangerous energy. Amy pressed her face against the window and stared up at the ships with wonder and fear. "Mom, what are those?" she called out. Her mother came running and grabbed Amy, pulling her away from the window. Her face was white with terror. "I don't know, baby. Stay away from the windows." All across the colony, people stopped what they were doing and looked up at the alien warships. Children pointed and asked questions. Adults stood frozen, not knowing what to do. Carl Johnson was in the security office when every alarm started ringing at once. His screen showed the massive ships hanging in the sky like dark clouds. His hands shook as he reached for the emergency radio. "This is Security Chief Johnson to all residents," he broadcast. "We are under attack by unknown forces. Move to emergency shelters immediately. This is not a drill." Jake Morrison heard the announcement and felt his heart sink. He had always hoped this day would never come. He grabbed his emergency communicator and tried to contact Earth, but nothing worked. The aliens had already cut off all communication. The first attack came without warning. Bright beams of energy shot down from the ships and hit the colony's power station. Lisa Parker was still inside, trying to keep the systems running. The building exploded in a flash of light and heat. "Lisa!" Carl screamed as he saw the explosion from his office window. He ran toward the burning building, but more energy beams started hitting all around the colony. He had to get to the emergency shelters. Amy's mother grabbed her daughter and ran outside. All around them, other families were running too. Children were crying and adults were shouting. The Harvest Festival decorations caught fire and burned in the streets. "Where are we going?" Amy asked as her mother carried her. "To the safe place under the school," her mother said. "Remember the emergency drills, we practiced this." But Amy could see that this was not like the drills. People were screaming and falling down. The beautiful purple grass was burning. The silver trees that made music were breaking and falling. Over Danny Rodriguez and his family were running toward the school too. Danny saw Amy and waved, but he looked scared. His little sister was crying in his father's arms. Above them, strange creatures were coming down from the ships in smaller vehicles. They were tall and covered in dark scales like reptiles. They carried weapons that shot bright plasma bolts. When the bolts hit people, the people fell down and did not get up again. Jake Morrison tried to organize the evacuation, but everything was happening too fast. The aliens seemed to know exactly where to attack. They hit the communication center, the power station, and the security office first. They had planned this attack very carefully. "Everyone to the emergency shelters," Jake shouted as he helped an old man who had fallen. "Stay together and keep moving." Carl Johnson reached the burning power station and searched through the smoke and flames for Lisa. He found her trapped under a fallen beam, unconscious but still breathing. He lifted the beam and carried her toward the school shelter. The alien creatures landed in the colony streets and began walking through the town. They were 7 feet tall with black scales and yellow eyes. They moved slowly and carefully, shooting anyone who tried to run or hide. Commander Vextar walked among his warriors, satisfied with their work. The human colony was falling apart just as he had predicted. These soft mammals had no real defenses, only weak civilians who could not fight. "Beck, burn everything," he ordered his soldiers. "Make sure no human escapes to warn others." Amy and her mother reached the school just as Helen Baker was helping other families into the underground shelter. Helen looked frightened, but was still trying to take care of everyone. "Hurry, hurry," Helen said, guiding people down the stairs. "There is room for everyone. We will be safe down here." The shelter under the school was big and strong. It had been built to protect the colonists from storms and earthquakes. The thick walls were made of metal and concrete. Amy thought they would be safe here. More than 200 children made it to the shelter along with many adults. They huddled together in the dark, listening to the sounds of battle above. Some of the smaller children were crying. The older kids tried to be brave. Danny found Amy in the crowd and sat next to her. "Are the bad aliens going to hurt us?" he whispered. "No," Amy said, trying to sound sure. "The shelter is strong, they cannot get in." But even as she said it, Amy could hear strange sounds above them. Heavy footsteps and voices speaking in a language she did not understand. The aliens were looking for them. Carl finally reached the shelter carrying Lisa. She was hurt badly, but still alive. Jake Morrison was already there, trying to keep everyone calm and quiet. "How many got away?" Carl asked quietly. Jake shook his head. "Not many. They knew exactly where to hit us. This was planned." Above them, Commander Vexitar studied the human school building. His scanners showed life signs in the underground shelter. Mostly small humans. Children. "Perfect. Prepare the plasma cutters," he told his warriors. "We will make an example of these young ones. When other human colonies see what happens to their offspring, they will surrender without a fight." The Zephyrian commander had made many successful conquests using this strategy. Kill the young first, and the adults lose all will to fight. It had worked on 6 different species already. But Vextar did not understand humans. He did not know that attacking human children was not just a military tactic. It was a declaration of war against something far more dangerous than any army. In the shelter, Amy held Danny's hand as they heard the sound of cutting tools working on the metal doors. Above, the aliens were coming for them and there was nowhere left to run. The sound of the plasma cutters grew louder and louder. In the emergency shelter, Amy could see bright sparks falling from the ceiling where the aliens were cutting through the metal doors. The air was getting hot and smoky. Helen Baker stood in front of all the children, her arms spread wide. Even though she was scared, she kept her voice calm and steady. "Stay behind me, children. Everything will be okay." But Amy could see that Helen was shaking. The teacher's kind face was pale and frightened. Amy reached out and took Danny's hand. His palm was wet with sweat. "I'm scared," whispered little Sarah Kim, who was only 5 years old. She was crying and looking for her parents, but they had not made it to the shelter. Amy let go of Danny's hand and moved over to Sarah. "It's okay," Amy said softly. "We're all together. We'll take care of each other. The plasma cutters finally broke through the doors. Smoke poured into the shelter, and everyone started coughing. Through the smoke came the tall, dark shapes of the Zephyrian warriors. Commander Vextar walked into the shelter first. His yellow eyes looked around at all the humans huddled together. Most of them were children, small, weak, and helpless. Perfect for his plan. "Listen carefully, humans," Vextar said in perfect English. His voice was cold and harsh like winter wind. "Your colony belongs to the Zephyrian Empire now. You will surrender, or you will all die." Jake Morrison stepped forward from the group of adults. His hands were raised to show he was not armed. "Please, we are just farmers and families. We have no weapons. Our children have done nothing wrong." Vextar looked at Jake with disgust. "Your species is weak because you care too much about your offspring. Today I will show you why that is a mistake." The alien commander made a gesture to his warriors. They raised their plasma weapons and pointed them at the children. Helen Baker stepped even further in front of her students. "No. If you want to hurt someone, hurt me. Leave the children alone." "Your sacrifice is noted," Vextar said without emotion. "But it changes nothing." Amy watched in horror as one of the alien warriors shot Helen with his plasma weapon. The teacher fell to the ground and did not move again. Several children screamed and the adults tried to rush forward, but more plasma bolts forced them back. "Now, you see?" Vextar announced. "Resistance is useless. We will kill every child in this shelter and we will broadcast the images across human space. When other human colonies see what happens to those who do not surrender immediately, they will give up without a fight." Carl Johnson, still holding the injured Lisa in his arms, felt rage building inside him like fire. "You're making a mistake," he said through gritted teeth. "Humans don't give up when you hurt our kids. We fight harder." Vextar laughed, a cold sound like ice breaking. "We have conquered 6 species using this exact strategy. Fear of losing their young makes all creatures weak and compliant." But Carl was right and Vextar was wrong. The alien commander did not understand humans at all. One of the Zephyrian warriors activated a recording device. They wanted to capture everything that happened next and send it to Earth as a warning. The camera focused on the frightened children, huddled together in the shelter. Amy saw the camera and understood what was happening. She knew her parents on Earth would see this recording. She knew they would be scared and sad. But she also knew something the aliens did not know about humans. "You can hurt us," Amy said, standing up straight even though she was terrified. "But our families will never give up. They will come for you." Vextar looked down at the 8-year-old girl with amusement. Bold words from such a small creature. "Your families are far away. They cannot help you now." Amy moved to stand next to Danny, who was trying to comfort little Sarah Kim. "Maybe not," Amy said. "But they will remember us, and they will make you pay." The alien commander had heard enough talking. He nodded to his warriors and they began firing their weapons into the group of children. Amy tried to protect Danny and Sarah, pushing them behind her as the plasma bolts started flying. The air filled with screams and the smell of burning. One by one, the children of New Eden fell. Danny Rodriguez died trying to shield Sarah Kim from the plasma fire. Sarah died calling for her mother. Amy Chen died holding the hand of a boy she barely knew, telling him not to be afraid. Helen Baker had been right about one thing. Her students stayed together until the very end. When it was over, the shelter was silent except for the quiet crying of the few adults who had survived by hiding behind metal supports. 200 children were dead, along with many of their parents and teachers. Vextar walked through the bodies, checking to make sure his work was complete. "Excellent," he said to his warriors. "Send the recording to Earth immediately. Make sure the message is clear. Surrender or watch your offspring die." Carl Johnson was still alive, though he was badly hurt. Lisa had died in his arms during the attack. He looked up at Vextar with eyes full of hatred. "You just killed your entire species," he whispered. "You have no idea what you've done." The alien commander ignored him. Humans always made threats when they were desperate. It meant nothing. Within hours, the recording reached Earth through Zephyrian communication networks. The aliens wanted to make sure every human saw what happened when they resisted the Empire. Admiral Kate Sullivan was in her office on Luna Station when the message arrived. She had been a military officer for 20 years and had seen many terrible things, but nothing had prepared her for the footage from New Eden. She watched 8-year-old Amy Chen try to protect her friends. She watched Danny Rodriguez die defending, a little girl he barely knew. She watched 200 innocent children murdered in cold blood, while their killers recorded it for entertainment. When the recording ended, Admiral Sullivan sat in silence for a long moment. Then she reached for her communication device with hands that shook with rage, not fear. "This is Admiral Sullivan to all Earth Defense Force commanders," she said, her voice deadly calm. "Initiate Protocol 77 immediately. Total war. Authorization against the Zephyrian Empire. No prisoners, no negotiation, no mercy." Across human space, military bases erupted into activity. Protocol 77 had never been used before. It meant complete destruction of an enemy species. It meant that humanity would not stop fighting until every Zephyrian was dead. The aliens had made their point clear with the recording. Now humanity would make their point clear with warships and weapons. On New Eden, Commander Vextar supervised the final destruction of the colony. He was pleased with his work. Soon, other human settlements would see the recording and surrender, without a fight. The Zephyrian commander had no way of knowing that he had just united every human in the galaxy behind a single purpose: revenge. The empire that had terrorized dozens of species was about to learn what happened when you made humanity truly angry. The children of New Eden were dead, but their sacrifice would be remembered, and it would be avenged. The recording from New Eden reached every corner of human space within 3 days. On Earth, families gathered around their screens and watched in horror as children died in the school shelter. On Mars, workers stopped their jobs and stood in silence. On the mining stations around Jupiter, grown men cried openly, but the sadness quickly turned to anger. Not the hot, quick anger that burns out fast, but the cold, steady anger that never goes away. Captain Steve Murphy was loading cargo on his transport ship Mercy's Edge when he saw the recording. Steve was not a soldier. He had never fired a weapon at another person. He carried food and supplies between the human colonies, and he liked his quiet life. But after watching 8-year-old Amy Chen die trying to protect her friends, Steve called his crew together. "Boys," he said to his 5 crew members, "we're going to war." His engineer, Pete Collins, looked confused. "Steve, we're not a warship. We carry grain and medicine." Steve's eyes were hard as steel. "Then we'll carry weapons instead." "Those monsters killed children, Pete. Our children." Within 6 hours, Steve and his crew had voted to convert their cargo ship into a weapon. They bought mining lasers and missile pods from the asteroid miners. They welded armor plates to their hull. The Mercy's Edge was no longer a transport ship. It was a ship of war. Steve Murphy was not alone. Across human space, thousands of civilian ships were being converted to weapons. Farmers, miners, traders, and teachers all volunteered to fight. They had no military training, but they had something more important. They were angry. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UES Retribution. Outside the viewports, she could see the largest fleet in human history assembling. 800 military warships formed the core, but they were joined by thousands of civilian vessels. Mining ships with plasma cutters, transport ships with missile launchers, even passenger liners with defensive guns. Every human who could hold a weapon had come to fight. "Admiral," said her communications officer, "we're receiving surrender requests from the Zephyrian High Command. They say they want to negotiate." Admiral Sullivan looked at the young officer with cold eyes. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing yet, ma'am. I wanted to check with you first." Sullivan walked to the communications station and took the microphone herself. She opened a channel to the Zephyrian fleet and spoke clearly. "This is Admiral Kate Sullivan of the Earth Defense Force. You killed our children. We do not negotiate with child killers. We destroy them." She closed the channel and turned back to her officers. "Any other questions about our mission?" No one had any questions. On New Eden, Carl Johnson was one of the few adult survivors of the massacre. He had been rescued by human forces when they retook the planet. His wife Lisa was dead. His friends were dead. The children he had sworn to protect were dead. Now Carl stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution next to Admiral Sullivan. She had asked him to come as an advisor, but really she wanted him there as a reminder of why they were fighting. "How do you want to handle the prisoners, Admiral?" asked the fleet tactical officer. Carl answered before Sullivan could speak. "What, prisoners?" he said quietly. The officer looked confused. "The civilian populations on Zephyrian worlds, sir." Carl pulled out a small photo from his pocket. It showed Amy Chen and Danny Rodriguez playing in the purple grass meadows of New Eden. They were both smiling and laughing. They were 8 years old, Carl said. Amy wanted to be a teacher like Helen Baker. Danny wanted to be an engineer like my Lisa. Now they're dead because these monsters thought killing children would make us weak. He put the photo away and looked at the tactical officer. "Every Zephyrian world, every ship, every station, we burn it all." Admiral Sullivan nodded. "You heard him, total war, no exceptions." The human fleet jumped into the Kepler system where New Eden had been. Commander Vextar was still there with his occupation force, thinking he was safe. He had never seen a human fleet before. When 800 warships and 3,000 civilian vessels appeared out of hyperspace, Vextar knew he had made a terrible mistake. "All ships prepare for battle," he ordered his fleet. The Zephyrians had 50 warships in the system. Against any normal enemy, that would have been enough. But humans were not normal when their children had been killed. The battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. The human ships came at the Zephyrians from all directions at once. Military vessels used their advanced weapons, while civilian ships rammed Zephyrian vessels with their armored hulls. Steve Murphy and his converted transport ship, Mercy's Edge, flew straight at a Zephyrian cruiser. His mining lasers cut through their shields and his missiles finished the job. As the enemy ship exploded, Steve thought about Amy Chen and felt satisfied. Commander Vexitar tried to escape in his flagship, but human fighters swarmed around him like angry bees. His ship was torn apart by weapons fire, and he died knowing that his plan had failed completely. But the humans did not stop with winning the battle. They used captured Zephyrian navigation computers to find every other world and station in the Empire. Admiral Sullivan divided her huge fleet into smaller groups. Each group had one target: destroy everything Zephyrian they could find. The war lasted 6 months, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Zephyrian Empire had ships and weapons and trained soldiers. But humans had something more powerful: the memory of dead children driving them forward. On the Zephyrian homeworld, the High Command sent desperate messages to the human fleet as it approached their planet. "We surrender," they broadcast. "We will pay any price for peace. Please, we have civilians here. We have children." The response came from Admiral Sullivan herself. "You should have thought about children before you killed ours." The human fleet bombarded the Zephyrian homeworld until nothing moved on its surface. They did the same to every other Zephyrian planet they found. Some human officers worried they were going too far. Captain Murphy found himself talking to Carl Johnson about it after they destroyed a Zephyrian colony ship. "Steve, I know this is hard," Carl said, "but you have to understand something. These creatures recorded themselves killing children and sent it across the galaxy as a threat. They wanted other species to be afraid." Carl showed Steve the photo of Amy and Danny again. "Now every species in the galaxy will see what happens when you hurt human kids. Maybe some alien leader somewhere will remember this and decide not to attack a human school." Steve looked at the photo and nodded. He understood now. This was not just about revenge. It was about making sure no human child would ever die like Amy and Danny had died. The war ended when the last Zephyrian military base was destroyed. The species that had conquered 6 others and terrorized dozens more was gone forever. Only a few thousand Zephyrian civilians remained, relocated to prison planets under permanent human guard. Admiral Sullivan stood in the ruins of New Eden and read the names of the dead children aloud. 200 names, including Amy Chen and Danny Rodriguez. Her voice never wavered, but tears ran down her face. Carl Johnson stood beside her, holding the photo of Amy and Danny. "They're avenged now," he said quietly. Sullivan nodded. and no one will ever forget what happens when you hurt our children. Around the galaxy, alien species that had been planning attacks on human colonies quietly canceled their plans. The message was clear. Humans could be negotiated with, traded with, even defeated in normal war. But touch their children, and humanity would erase you from existence. 5 years after the last Zephyrian ship was destroyed, New Eden looked very different. The burned buildings had been replaced with a beautiful memorial park. Purple grass grew everywhere, just like Amy Chen and Danny Rodriguez used to love. But now there were also 200 white stone markers, one for each child who died in the school shelter. Carl Johnson walked slowly through the memorial garden every morning. He was older now, with gray hair and tired eyes, but he still came here every day. He stopped at Amy's marker and placed a small flower next to her name. "Morning, sweetheart," he said quietly. Another quiet day in the galaxy. Carl was the commander of the New Eden Memorial Guard now. 50 other humans had volunteered to stay on the planet and protect the memorial. Most of them were parents who had lost children in the massacre. They understood why this place was important. The memorial was more than just a place to remember the dead. It had become the most visited site in human space. Every week, ships arrived carrying visitors from across the galaxy. Humans came to pay their respects. But they were not the only ones. Alien diplomats came too. They came to learn about what happened when someone hurt human children. The memorial was both a grave and a warning. Steve Murphy still lived on New Eden too. His transport ship Mercy's Edge was now permanently stationed in orbit around the planet. He had never gone back to his old job of carrying cargo. Instead, he helped patrol the system and guide visitors to the memorial. "Admiral Sullivan's ship is approaching," Steve reported over the radio to Carl. "She's bringing another group of alien ambassadors." Carl nodded and walked toward the landing pad. Admiral Sullivan visited the memorial several times a year, usually with important aliens who needed to understand the lesson of New Eden. The Admiral's shuttle landed softly on the grass. Kate Sullivan stepped out first, still wearing her military uniform even though the war was long over. Behind her came 3 alien creatures that Carl had never seen before. They were tall and thin with blue skin and large black eyes. They moved carefully and seemed nervous. Carl could tell they had heard the stories about what happened here. "Carl," Admiral Sullivan said with a smile, "I'd like you to meet Ambassador Krill and his staff from the Andromeda Republic. They're considering a trade agreement with humanity." Ambassador Krill stepped forward and bowed politely. "Commander Johnson, we have heard much about this place. We come to understand why it is so important to your species." Carl studied the alien diplomat carefully. Krill seemed respectful and genuine, not like the cold Zephyrians had been. "Welcome to New Eden, Ambassador. I hope you learn what you need to know here." They walked together through the memorial garden. Carl explained how the colony had been peaceful and happy before the attack. He showed them the spot where the school had stood, now marked by a simple stone building that housed the historical records. "The Zephyrians thought killing our children would make us surrender," Carl said, as they stood before the memorial wall. "They were wrong." Ambassador Krill looked at the names carved into the black stone. 200 names of children who would never grow up. "We have studied your war against the Zephyrians," he said quietly. "Your response was complete." "It had to be," Admiral Sullivan said. "The message needed to be clear. Touch human children and we will destroy you utterly." One of Krill's assistants, a younger alien with nervous eyes, spoke up. "But surely some Zephyrian civilians were innocent. Did they all deserve to die?" Carl turned to look at the young alien. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard. "Let me show you something." He led them into the memorial building where video screens played recordings from the massacre. The aliens watched in horror as Commander Vexitar ordered the killing of the children. They saw Amy Chen trying to protect her friends. They saw Danny Rodriguez die defending little Sarah Kim. "The Zephyrians recorded this themselves," Carl explained. "They sent it across the galaxy as a threat. They wanted other species to see what happened to human children and be afraid." The young alien assistant looked sick. "They They enjoyed it. Yes, Carl said simply. They enjoyed killing children, so we enjoyed killing them, every last one of their military forces. Ambassador Krill was quiet for a long time after watching the recording. Finally, he spoke. I understand now why your species responded as you did. In our culture, children are also precious. We would have done the same. Admiral Sullivan nodded. That's why we bring diplomats here, Ambassador. So you understand that humans can be reasonable and peaceful. We want to trade with you and be friends. But there are lines that should never be crossed. They walked back outside to the memorial garden. Other visitors were there too. A group of human school children on a field trip stood quietly by the memorial wall while their teacher explained what had happened. Some alien tourists took pictures and read the historical markers. Near Amy Chen's marker, an old human woman was kneeling and crying softly. Carl recognized her as Amy's grandmother, who came from Earth every year on the anniversary of the massacre. Mrs. Chen, Carl said gently, how are you doing today? The old woman looked up with tears in her eyes. She would have been 13 now, she said. Amy would have been a teenager, probably complaining about school and boys. Carl knelt down beside her. Amy was very brave at the end. She tried to protect the other children. You should be proud of her. Mrs. Chen nodded and wiped her eyes. I am proud, and I'm glad you made them pay for what they did. As the sun set over New Eden, the alien diplomats prepared to leave. Ambassador Krill shook hands with Carl and Admiral Sullivan. We will remember what we learned here, Krill promised. The Andromeda Republic values its friendship with humanity. We would never harm your young. I believe you, Carl said, but if you ever change your mind, remember what happened to the Zephyrians. After the aliens left, Carl and Admiral Sullivan stood alone in the memorial garden. The 3 moons of New Eden were rising, casting silver light over the white stone. Markers, do you think we went too far? Admiral Sullivan asked. It was a question she had been thinking about for 5 years. Carl looked at Amy Chen's marker and remembered the little girl who had loved purple grass and crystal formations. Kate, every alien species in the galaxy now knows what happens if they hurt human children. How many kids do you think we've saved by making that message clear? Admiral Sullivan nodded slowly. Probably thousands, maybe millions. Then no, Carl said. We didn't go too far. We went exactly as far as we needed to go. Across the galaxy, in the council chambers of a dozen different alien civilizations, the story of New Eden was told and retold. Some species called humans violent and dangerous. Others called them protective and loyal. But every species agreed on one thing: human children were never to be harmed. The price for that mistake had been demonstrated once, and no one wanted to pay it again. On Earth, in classrooms and homes, human children learned about Amy Chen and Danny Rodriguez and the other brave kids who died on New Eden. They learned that their parents and their government would do anything to protect them. And in the cold depths of space, where new alien species were just beginning to explore the galaxy, they eventually encountered human ships and human colonies. Most of these first meetings were peaceful and friendly. But when the aliens asked about human culture and human values, they were always told the same story. The story of a little girl named Amy Chen who tried to protect her friends. The story of a boy named Danny Rodriguez who died defending a child he barely knew. The story of what happened to the Zephyrian Empire when they thought human love for their children was a weakness. It was not a weakness. It was the most dangerous strength in the galaxy, and now everyone knew it.